This video will run a Java example to explore using exception handling and other input validation techniques to collect information from the user that's within the context of the problem that we're trying to solve. We're going to use some loops, and we're going to use exception handling, and we're going to use a Sentinel value on this example. This is going to be a fairly complicated example, so it might take a little longer to finish, and you might have to review this more than once to get all the pieces well understood. This is the challenge: write a Java program to prompt the user to enter an integer between 100 and 199. So now we have two input validation requirements. It has to be a valid integer, and it has to be at least 100 and not greater than 199. So we're going to have, it's a range validation that we're going to have to enter. And then we want to give them an error message if they've entered an invalid entry. Then we want to repeat the process until they enter quit. So in addition to entering 100, 101, 102, etc. to 199, you can enter the word quit, and it says it has to be case insensitive. And if that special value comes back, then we want to terminate the program. Once the user enters quit, we want to output the sum of the numbers entered and the count of how many were entered. So we're going to have a while loop that just goes until the user enters quit, and then and in that while loop, we'll be prompting the user, and then we'll be summing up the numbers and keeping track of how many they've entered. Okay, so let's jump into JDoodle and get started. Here's my boilerplates. Get rid of that. Import my scanner. Find the scanner. Okay, there we go. Oops, misspelled that. Okay. So now what do we want? We need a while loop so that we can prompt the user to enter integer data. And then we're gonna have to do validation on that. We're gonna check for the Sentinel value of quit, and then we're going to add up the numbers and print the results. So first thing we're gonna need is a while loop. So this is gonna be a keep going loop. So I'm gonna say Boolean keep going equals true, while keep going. Here's my while loop. Okay. So now what I want to do is I want to ask the user to enter an integer between 100 and 199 or the word quit. So I need to have a method that's going to return a string value, because the valid values are 100, 101, 102, 103, etc. to 199, but also the string value quit. So I can't do just a straight int return here. I'm going to need a string return, and then I'm going to have to do some checking in the main method here. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to say I'm going to call a method here, and then we're going to implement the method. So string I'm going to call a method that's going to return a string. So I'm going to say string input equals, I'm going to call it get int range or quit. So that's going to be get an int within a range or the word quit. Okay. I'm going to pass the scanner. I'm going to pass the prompt. Enter an integer between 100 and 199. We'll say quit or quit. Okay. And then we'll add two more parameters, which will be the min and the max values. Okay, so that's what that's going to look like. Okay. So get int range or quit. It takes 4 parameters: the scanner, the prompt that I'll put out on the screen to tell the user what to do, and then the minimum and the maximum value. Okay. So let's go ahead and code that method. Public static It's going to be a string return type. Takes 4 parameters: scanner, prompt. In this case, it's an int min and an int max. Okay. So this is going to be a while true loop because I'm going to want to get the integer. So I'm just going to say while true. I'm going to output the prompt, system.out print line, put out the prompt. Okay. So now the user has been told what to do. So this prompt is just this value, enter an integer between 100, 199, or quit. So then I'll do the input. Scanner string input equals scanner dot next line. Okay. So now I have the input. So now I need to do 3 pieces of input validation. First is I want to check for the special value of quit. Okay. The next thing I want to do is make sure that if it's not the value of quit, I want to make sure it's a valid integer. If I know it's a valid integer, I want to make sure it's within range. Okay. I'm going to come back and I'm going to force this to be to uppercase so that whatever they enter will be converted to uppercase. First thing, let's check for the value of quit. If input dot equals we'll test for quit all uppercase because I've converted, I did a 2 uppercase here, right? So if it equals quit, if input dot equals quit, then what? Then I'm done. Return input. So quit is one of the valid answers. So if it's quit, I'm going to send it back to the main method. Okay. If it's not this, then I want to do another test. Now I want to do a try catch block. So I'm going to say try, because now I need to verify that it's a valid integer. So now I'm going to say try, open the block. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to parse int number equals integer dot parse int input. Okay. If they entered a valid integer, then that will be successful. And I can return that. Okay, so if that's the case, then we can say return number. Okay, and I could do a catch here. I'm going to catch a number format exception called E. And what happens here is if this parse int fails, then this catch block will catch it, and I can say that that is not a valid integer. Okay. And there we go. And we'll put a blank line at the end of that. /n. We can use the /n because we're using print line. If we're using printf, we'd want a %n, but since we're using print line, we can just use a /n. So that will print a blank line at the end. So it'll, I'm just trying to make sure that I'm formatting the console so that the user can see what they're doing. We might have to come back and work on that a little bit more. Okay, so now what we have done here is we verified that the value is quit, or that it's a valid integer. We haven't done the range check yet, but let's run this because we've typed a lot of code and we need to make sure we haven't made any mistakes. And I have. So my definition of my method was incorrect. So public static string is the return type. I forgot to put in the name of the method. Okay, so see the error here is at line 12. Public static string. I didn't type the name of the method, so I just made a mistake when I was defining the method. So this is what it should look like, I think. Let's execute that and see. Okay, still have an error here. Return number. Oh, I can't return number because number is a string. So, and the number is an integer, and I'm supposed to be returning the string. So I need to return input here instead of string. So now what I have here is I know that because I've validated this using this input validation method, I know in my main method, whatever I get back is either going to be quit or a valid integer. So I can parse it up here with impunity without having to worry about that failing. So we're going to return input because we have to return a string. Let's keep going. Enter an integer between 100 or 199. So I can say, if I enter something that's not a valid integer, it says that's not a valid integer. I can enter a number 109. Okay, that's a valid integer. So then now I've just looped back and I'm entering it again. Okay, so we haven't done the range check yet. So if I enter an integer 92, that's I should get an error message there, but we just haven't coded that yet. Or I could enter quit, mixed case, and that would be taken as a valid integer. Okay, so or as a valid entry. So it's working as much as I've written. Okay, so it's not done. We haven't solved the problem, but I have done enough validation to make sure I don't have any syntax errors, and at least the code that I wrote is working the way I expected to. So let's go ahead and stop that execution. Let's keep going. So now let's go in and edit. Let's do the first things first is let's come back into main and let's process the exit. Okay. So we come in here and we say, oops. Come in here and we say, let's go ahead and save this while I'm working on that. We'll call it input validation in our class. Let's go ahead and save that. So if something happens to my project, I won't lose all my work. Okay. So now if the user has entered quit, I want to test for that and change the values, keep going and exit the program. So now we're going to say if input that equals quit. Remember, it's all uppercase. Then I want to say keep going equals false. The program will end. Okay, so keep in mind that this method get int range or quit has already done the validation to make sure that whatever comes back from that method is either the Sentinel value quit or a string value that can be safely parsed into an integer. Okay, so if it's not the Sentinel value, then we can do the parse. So what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to sum up the integers and we're going to want to count them. So we can do the sum. First thing I need to do is I need to parse that because one of the valid return values of my get in range or quit is a string, all the values are strings. So now I know it's not quit, which means it's going to be a valid integer. So now I can parse it. Int value equals, and I don't have to do a try block here because I've already protected myself using the method, using input validation here in this method to make sure that that this will parse correctly. Okay, so now it's parsed. So now I can sum it up. So I want a sum and a counter. But I'm going to want to be able to use those after the while loop. So I need to define them before the while loop. Otherwise, if I define them inside the while loop, once the while loop ends, those variables will be gone because they'll be scoped inside the while loop. So I can say int sum equals 0, and I can say int count equals 0. Okay. So now I can say sum plus equals value. This is an accumulation. So we'll just, the value of sum will be just the summation, the sum of all the values we entered. And then I can say count plus plus. We're just going to keep track of those. And then here after the while loop ends, I can say system.out.println. We'll do a printf. And we'll say you entered. We'll do the count %d, so that'll be an integer value. You entered %d numbers that add to, and then we'll do % comma d because we want 1,000 separated here. This will also be an integer because we're in it. And then the two values will be sum, will be count, sum. Okay. All right, let's run this and make sure it works. We still have one thing missing, which is the range between 100 and 199, but I think we've got the rest of the problem pretty well solved. So we entered value, we entered gibberish, it says that's not a valid integer. Okay, if we enter 100, that's valid. Enter an integer. Let's say 35. This shouldn't work, but we haven't actually written that logic yet, so it's going to work. So we're going to have to solve that. 199, 125, 1009. That's also not a valid number, but we haven't coded that yet. And then of course the Sentinel value quit, which should be case insensitive. Let's see if it works. You entered 5 numbers that add to 1,468. I guess we could add those numbers up, but I feel pretty good that that's 1,468. Okay. All right. So now the last thing that's left is we want to make sure that the number we entered is between 100 and 199. So we come back to our get int range or quit method. And so right here, we know that the number is, that we know that the number is a valid integer, okay, because we parsed it. But before we return it, we want to do another check. We want to say if number greater than or equal to min and number less than or equal to max. If that's true, then we know that it's within the range we want, and we can return the string value. Otherwise, we want to print out an error message. Let's do a printf here. Let's say must. Let's just do a print line. Print line. We'll just say that is not valid integer. Okay, it's a valid integer, but it's not within the range that we want. Okay. We don't have to print the min and the max because it's in the prompt already. Okay, so and then let's put a /n at the bottom of that. Okay. And let's go ahead and okay, let's run that. That should do it. Okay, so here's our integer value. Gibberish still doesn't work. If I enter 99, that number's too low, so that should not work. If I enter 200, that shouldn't work. If I enter 100, that should work. 101 should work. 150, all these numbers in between 100 and 199 should work. 199. We can do a real big one because we know it's not going to work because we've already tested. Okay, so let's go ahead and say quit. Four numbers that add to 550. Okay, so that does it. So that's input validation with, I'm going to save that just to make sure we don't lose it. So that is input validation using a method and a Sentinel value.